farmer is that founder, but with such a broken system where he's like struggling with fund flow, working with loan sharks, has to worry about the weather cycle, can't manipulate that. So there's just so many extra headaches that it takes away from that farming experience, and that's what makes people leave. It's not the actual farming.
Yeah.
Both of us always wanted to get back to farming. Okay, we'll just start, like it's okay and stuff. So I put up a picture on LinkedIn, and a lot of people had commented, and Mr. Shashi was one of them. And he was like, we need people like you in agriculture. And I was like, yes! Like, sent the screenshot in our group, and we're like validated by Akshay Kalpa.
So most of your farmers are women?
The people that are working on the farm, majority of them tend to be women. Women play a very, very integral role that I think is not showcased enough. I remember I would have a yogurt parfait every day, and I was like, yogurt, granola and fruits. Wow, I'm so healthy. And one of my friends was like, that yogurt's full of sugar, right? It's actually not that healthy. Whatever I thought I knew about health and food was marketed in such a way that I just didn't know. Like, I was eating the wrong things, thinking I was eating the right things.
Reels, and it's this guy, like, you just like take basil and you put it in a thing and you do this and you do that, and then you have basil forever. Mama, like, she always had this funny habit, like we would come back after festivals like 2 a.m, 3 a.m. She'd be like, are you guys making any money? Like, are you okay? Like, is there a profit? And we'd be like, yeah, we are. Like, leave us alone.
Culture of giving food always existed.
Yeah.
But earlier it was, hey, these are coconuts from my farm that I'm going to bring to you. But that's what it is. Like, you want to share love through food because food is love.
I felt like a fraud coming on the show because I have never thought about the food that I've eaten.
What's your go-to meal when you want something quick, healthy and clean?
Honestly, I love curd rice.
What's the most surprising thing you've learned about food labels?
Less sugar or no sugar means nothing.
I don't read people.
Okay. If you had to describe good food in 3 words, what would they be?
I would say tasty, nutritious, and makes you feel good about yourself after you eat.
Can I skip these questions?
Snacking throughout the day or structured meals?
Structure.
Snacking throughout the day.
This is
Which one is better?
changing.
Who got more points?
So if you could give one piece of advice to someone starting their clean eating journey, what would it be? Climate change, farming practices, and even festivals shape the flowers we use every day. In this episode of Good Food Talks, we sit down with the sisters behind Hoovu Fresh, who took a centuries-old flower industry and gave it a fresh twist. Picture 2 sisters, completely different. One health conscious, the other, I'll eat anything. But together they've created something extraordinary. A business that's not just selling flowers, but reviving a dying conversation about farming, sustainability, and our forgotten connection to the land. This isn't just another business story. It's about reimagining agriculture, empowering women farmers, and finding hope in the most unexpected places. Hi Yashoda Riya, welcome to Good Food Talks.
Hi, Vachana.
So what we do with Good Food Talks is to, have conversations around food, to see how different aspects impact the food that we're eating today. Because there's a lot happening in this space. The air is getting affected, the water is getting affected, and the land itself is getting affected, right? So we've had multiple such conversations, and we're so happy to have the 2 of you on the show today.
Thank you so much for having us here.
Yeah, we're excited to be here.
With the background that you have in floriculture, growing up on the farms would have been an experience. Would you like to share some fond memories, on this with us? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it was always really exciting, and our parents started their business around the time that I was born, and then Riya. So they would always take us to the farms. They always made it seem like it was this fun outing, but it was an excuse for them to work and like have us around. But honestly, it was so much fun. It was because we grew up around that. I think we were very comfortable with being in nature, being in the farms. And for me, I don't know, when I think of a fond memory, I just think of myself on like my dad's shoulders and like trying to touch these different trees and the gum that would come out of the rubber trees, right? Like I remember seeing that and being like, oh my God, this is like the coolest thing that could exist. But yeah, I think all of that was very normalized for when we were kids.
Yeah. I remember like we used to have this desk that had a shelf within it. And this one time my grandmom opened it up and it was like full of fungus because we'd brought gum back from the farm. And I was like, oh, it's like glue. Like I can use it whenever, and just kept it there. And it was really funny when we first built our like cold storage for Hoovu. It was like our first big capital investment. both Yashta and I went in and we were like, oh, this takes us back to our childhood. Because our parents would take us to the farm, it'd be very hot, all of that stuff. And they'd be like, go to the cold room if you're tired. So we'd go and we'd be like, AC, like luxury in the farm, and then come back out again. So all of these memories, like for our second anniversary for Huvu, we took the whole team to our parents' farm. And we were showing our little sister, we were like, when we were kids, we used to touch all these touch-me-nots, and it was like a game for us, and walking between the beds of the roses and everything. So I think we're very lucky to have gotten like that kind of upbringing, even though it was just an excuse for our parents to like have us be somewhere while they were working. So yeah, it's been really nice.
That's amazing. And how do you see this experience playing up now, like playing a role in what you're doing now?
Yeah. I think for us, like when we started, a lot of people were like, these two girls, they're like 20 something, they've just come back from America. Like, what do they really know about this industry, right?
Yeah.
Like puja flowers is kind of a rough and tumble industry. Like you go to the mandis and everyone's like shouting at you. You can get run over at any time, all of that stuff. But for us, we were like, this is how we grew up. Like, it just felt so natural because every Valentine's Day, our parents would take us to the farm because that's like peak for roses, right? And like there's so many pictures of us as kids like carrying rose boxes and crates, thinking we're like helping everyone. So we're like, yeah, we're used to all of this stuff. And I think like we had to learn a lot. So we have a person in our team called Geeta Shankar. So she's head of our procurement and she's like our superwoman. She's done every role in the company, to be honest. She has taught us so much about this field, and the farmers that we work with have taught us so much. So it's not saying that we came in knowing everything about floriculture. Yeah. We're still learning so much about it, but we weren't intimidated. It didn't feel like, oh, it's this foreign world of something else. It was like, yeah, you put in a certain amount of stuff, you get out a certain thing. And then like, you know, weather and God plays a role in it as well. It just made us open, I think, to like learning about the whole experience.
Yeah, and it made it exciting as well because we saw what was done in the floriculture industry on that side when it came to roses. And then when we came back and saw how it was kind of different for puja flowers, but there was so much potential, then we were excited to be there having those conversations with farmers. And one, it didn't intimidate us, but also two, it didn't alienate us from the farmers that we were working with to an extent. Like first when we would walk in and they're like, okay, yeah, these girls are just going to say something and leave and probably never come back. But when we would tell them about our experiences and then they knew that it was genuine, then they were also interested in teaching us, right? And being like, okay, you don't know this, but you want to learn. So we kind of want to be on this journey with you, which was great for us.
So even in flowers, there's this whole monoculture way of doing it, or is it like multiple flowers in the same field?
It depends. So when it comes to roses and stuff, those are grown in the greenhouses, right? So there it's just one type of variety. Here, with the other flowers, there's actually intercropping with a couple of vegetables or based on seasonality. They kind of plan around the festive season and might do chrysanthemum and then some vegetables during the down season and so on.
I think a lot of it is driven by the economics, right? Some of it is good agricultural practice. Some of it is also like these flowers, because they didn't have a market as such, like taking it to the mandi was like not always very profitable for these farmers. It's like when you don't have anything else to grow on the field, then you grow these flowers in like those periods of like 3 months, 6 months and stuff like that. So I think that has kind of created this culture of rotating it. But people who are doing well, they kind of just grow one crop at a time because they also, I guess, need different treatment and stuff like that.
When you said that because of that, people, this is a culture of rotation. What is I don't know the culture of rotation in flowers.
What Yashta was talking about, right? Like you might have your main crop, which is some kind of fruit or vegetable or something like that. And then when you're taking a break from it, you do like marigold or sevanti or roses because they're kind of like low value crops compared to everything else.
One common thing that exists between Akshakalpa and Huvu is the work that both of us are doing, which is in the space of farming. And harvest festivals play a huge role, not just from a celebration point of view, but also from the point of view of telling us about seasonality, telling us about climate, the role of climate in our lives. What has the impact of this been on Huvu itself?
I think it's been really interesting for us because when we started, obviously we knew the big festivals, but we probably didn't know it in the depth that we kind of know of it now. And a lot of it came from our customers teaching us and then us creating content to teach our customers again, right?
What's it like working with farmers? And, what are some of the pain points of working in floriculture as far as farming is concerned?
It's honestly very interesting. And I think again, what I said earlier, right? When we went in being like, we don't know anything, like, we're here to learn, that kind of opened up that opportunity, that communication channel between both of us, right? And the biggest pain point, I think, which has improved a lot now because we've been doing this for a while, was that trust, where even when you go to the mandi, like the first thing people do when they're buying flowers is put their hand at the bottom of the bag, right? Because you know that the quality is going to be mixed up and so on. So being able to have those conversations with farmers, build trust from our end, being like, we're not just here today and like disappearing tomorrow. We're trying to build a company that's sustainable, that every single day we're going to show up and buy flowers from you. That took some time. And obviously we had to prove ourselves to do that. And even for us to kind of have that trust and build the right kind of farmer network and people that are, also attuned to what we're doing. That I think was the largest pain point, but it just kind of shows how overall that system is broken, right? Because the farmer's not trying to send bad quality flowers. He has such high wastage on his farm. Unless he adds in his bad quality flowers, he's not going to build something that's economically viable for him. So when we're able to say, no, we're going to pay a higher price for your good quality flowers and we're going to buy them every day, then he doesn't need to do any of these things, right? And then they come back to us and give us a lot of feedback as well, saying, oh, I have these flowers, but the bud size is too small. Like, let me harvest it tomorrow for you and stuff. So I think when you're kind of able to create that entire pipeline for the farmer, you're allowing him to also excel at what he does best. And then you're obviously able to take it to the end customer as well. Sorry to say something.
No, I completely agree. And I think like we always think, especially like entrepreneurs, I think today are like, oh, the challenges of working with farmers. But honestly, it's an opportunity, right? Like it's such an amazing opportunity to get to work with people. And they don't have this like burn model and all. They're like, they're actually doing things that's adding value and doing it in a profitable way. And I think one problem that they've all had, like I think across agriculture in India, is market linkage, right? The farmer at the end of the day is creating so much value, but because they don't have that linkage to the market, they lose out in kind of every transaction that they're doing. But today, with the kind of market linkage that we have, we can bring so much value back. And I think it's a very interesting time to be building as well, right? Like if you open your like Zepto, Swiggy, Blinkit, fresh produce is like the number one obvious thing that is there. So it's a great opportunity. It's a great moment. But how do we use this moment? Not so that we're all chasing the lowest possible price and like all farmers are now driven to the, cost price because there's these huge customers, but rather that now we see the value on the other end. We know people are willing to pay like 2-3x the price to get their fresh produce on time. How do we send that value back to the farmer?
One of the things that when I would like go meet farmers and speak to them, one of the farmers, he spoke about the fact that like the question I asked him was, who should consume Akshay Kalpa, right? And he said that anyone as they're growing older, people who don't want to have Ben Navu, Kal Navu, those people should drink Akshay Kalpa, right? So like what I felt in that moment was when you take away their worries that come with farming, they have time to sit and think about things that are core to growing good food. It could be things that they do, whether they do at the farm or the kind of customers who should be consuming, what should they be consuming, the stories that they can share with us. All of these things I feel come out when you make them secure about that one thing that they are doing, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%.
And it's so true, right? Like anybody that's doing a certain profession, the best way to let them do it is to only let them do that. The only time you're trying to do everything is when you're like a founder. And we give way too much credit to startup founders and ourselves saying, oh, I'm doing all of these things. But you still have such a big ecosystem. You have fundraising and this and that. But that's what that farmer is. That farmer is that founder, but with such a broken system where he's like struggling with fund flow, working with loan sharks, has to worry about the weather cycle, can't manipulate that, has to grow his crop, which he's so probably most excited to do. But along with that, then be like, it's not just about getting a good crop. I have to also get rid. Like now, if I have a great harvest, okay, but if I don't have the demand for that harvest, it's of no use, right? I can't just store it in a warehouse or whatever. So there's just so many extra headaches that it takes away from that farming experience. And that's what makes people leave. It's not the actual farming. Right?
Yeah.
And you kind of use this word and then, but you like, it's true. Like when people have a harvest, they're not thinking of it as bountiful. They're like, I have to get rid of this right now because now it's a burden for them. But if you have that market linkage, which, I think the government is doing a lot with the APMCs and stuff like that, but there's still a lot more that can be done. like if you have that predictability, so many of our farmers, like when we go to visit their farm and all, we're like, you know, there are worms in the marigold, so why don't you do neem oil or put it in the sun or whatever it is? They're like, ma'am, I'll do anything. You tell me, will you take 100 kgs every day from me? If I have that headache free, I don't have to worry about all of that. I will do anything to give you the best possible crop, because like Yashita said, that's actually what their passion is. So like, how do we go back to thinking like this harvest is like bountiful, it's good, it's great, not like how do I get rid of this burden that I kind of have now.
Yeah. No, it's really nice to, speak to young people about farming. I feel that it's becoming such a rarity these days. There is a statistic to say more than 2,000 farmers leave farming every single day in India. I feel there's need for more such startups in this ecosystem to take people back to farming.
Yeah. And it's so funny, like even in our own team, like who do the processing, like our warehouse managers and stuff. When we put up a picture and we said, today we like plowed the land, today we got water and everything, they are sending me so many personal messages and they're like, ma'am, this has to be done. Like, because they all are from agri backgrounds, right? They all have farms back home that they have left to pursue better opportunities like in the city. But you suddenly make this valuable, then like, there's really no end to what can be.
This is a funny story, but I had braces for a long time, for like 4 years. So my mom used to take me to the dentist every time. And, just chit-chatting. So you'd be like, what do you do? And my mom's like, we grow roses. So then when I started with my braces thing, she would tell him like, we grow roses. Next time he's like, how do you grow roses? And then he's like, I have this empty land nearby, but like I'm a dentist here. Is it an easy crop? And they're like, yeah, open field cultivation. Now my dentist is one of our suppliers for chrysanthemums, roses, and for Valentine's Day roses, everything. And to the point where recently I overheard him talking to my dad and he's like, I'm thinking of really getting into this more and like spending a lot more time on it and stuff. And it's so nice to see like everybody wants to be attuned with nature, wants to be doing something. And in India, we have that blessing of everyone's father or grandfather or someone that was close to them was involved in farming, and you just want to go back to your roots in that sense.
Give him a shout out, say his name.
Yeah, Dr. Rajshekhar.
When we were thinking of doing farming again, a lot of people were like, you're in front of the value chain. Why do you want to go back where there are more problems, lower value and everything? But we were like, no, we want to try it. And there might be things in the cultivation which we can control and grow differently, which will change the way that these flowers are actually processed at the end of the day, which right now people are not experimenting on, but we can because we have a little bit of that flexibility. So then, we were like playing around with it. We were telling people about it and then we were like, okay, we'll just start, like it's okay and stuff. So I put up a picture on LinkedIn and, a lot of people had commented and Mr. Shashi was one of them. And he was like, we need people like you in agriculture. And I was like, yes, like it was so validating. And like Yashoda was saying, we like sent the screenshot in our group and we're like validated by Akshay Kalpa. It was just such a like happy, fun moment. And I think like we needed that support, right? We needed someone to be like, this is a good idea, guys. So we're like, we knew it was a good idea. Like
one large thing we do in Huvu is share a lot of spiritual significant stories. Like even for Bilpatra, I remember Ria found this story and we thought it was so beautiful about how why Bilpatra is used for Shiva Puja and stuff like that. And I remember we put it up on our Instagram and everything. And it's not that people, like the older generation knew it. The younger generation was being educated about it. But still a lot of older people were sharing it because they're like, oh, this is an outlet to tell this story that didn't exist before. So the same way, if we're able
the story?
Okay, I'll let Ria tell it because she tells it more beautifully.
Okay, now I'm also a little scared to tell you. That's a lot of pleasure. But so it's basically the story of this hunter and he's in the forest doing his hunting thing. And while he's there, like a tiger spots him and starts chasing him. So then he climbs on top of a tree and the tiger's like circling the base of the tree. So he's like waiting it out, right? He's like, oh my God. At this time, he's in a bilpatra tree. Like he realizes that's the tree he's climbed. And below the tree with the tiger circling is a shivling. So in that moment, he has two options, right? He can be like, oh my God, I'm so scared. This tiger is going to eat me. It's going to kill me. Like you can spend your whole time stressed out about that, the whole night that you have to spend up there. But what he chooses to do is the second option, which is he starts plucking the bilpatra tree, which has 3 leaves. So it looks kind of like a shivling. And he starts dropping it on the shivling below and chanting that, right? And like, whether you're religious or whether you're not, I think those are the two options we kind of always have in life, right? Like when you're stressed out about a deadline, you're stressed out about like upcoming EMI, like whatever it is, you can be like, oh my God, I'm so scared, I'm so scared, I'm so scared. Like even when the thing is like not yet happened to you. Or you can be like, in this moment, I want to be happy and I want to be grateful. And like in this moment, I want to, like, for him, it was like Om Namah Shivaya. Like for us, it can be like whatever else it is. And it's just like such a nice idea. Like,
Beautiful.
you know, Bilpatra is supposed to cool down Shivlings. That's why it's used in like Shiv Puja. But it's also true for him, right? Like it like calmed him, it centered him. The night has to pass. The tiger is there. Like, you can't be below in the tree and then be like, Om Namah Shivaya, and then the tiger won't do anything to you.
Yeah.
You have to take your action. You have to be up in the tree. You have to wait it out. But then it's up to you, like your mindset while you're doing that. So I think it was just like a nice story.
I mean, we're a puja flower company. So there's an abundance of flowers available. And our office is next to our house and our warehouse is below. So easy access, right? But every day, my grandmom would go to the tree outside our house and pluck the flowers from there. And every day we would be like, what flowers do you want? We can give it to you. She's like, I don't want any of these flowers. I want to go pluck my flower. And she doesn't do puja. My mom does puja. So she would pluck them, keep it outside the puja room so my mom can do her puja. And that was like her way of like building that relationship, right? And it just reminded me of what you said.
I remember she would be like making jasmine garlands like in her room. And I was like, Mama, like this is what I do like for a living, you know, right? And she always had this funny habit. Like we would come back after festivals, like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. She'd be up to serve us food first of all. And she'd be like, are you guys making any money? Like, are you okay? Like, is there a profit? And we would be like, yeah, we are. Like, leave us alone. So then I was like, you keep asking us if we're making money. If you buy this jasmine from us, we will make money. But she was like, no, this is my meditation, you know, making the garlands.
I
and
think
stuff.
that's what it was. Like there was a lot of being in that moment. That was a huge part of doing these things, which I think we've outsourced now. Like even growing food is known to be meditative. It's known to be very good for people going through anxiety and depression, because there's so much in the soil, isn't it, that can feed mental health.
And you don't overeat then. Like when you know how much effort, or you never waste food when you know how much effort has gone into it, right? Only when you're just like serving yourself from a buffet, you can think you can just throw all that food aside.
Coming to the sweet potato story.
Oh, yeah. No, I was saying because my mom, my grandmom, and I feel Yeshu also, but like now you're like kind of not owning up to it. Like had this project where they like, my grandmom always like is obsessed with her garden, but in the back garden, they started growing like chilies and like sweet potatoes and stuff like that. And I remember like the day they got a singular sweet potato from the plant, it was like, oh my God, like everyone come, like see it and all. And my mom was like, this is from our plant. My grandma was like, this is from our plant. I love sweet potatoes. So they were like, Ria, you eat it. So then like, it was like such a big ceremony because we had grown it in our own house. And like, otherwise you buy like dime a dozen in the market and you don't even think about it, right? And they were like, how is it? How does it taste? And I was like, so good.
I thought you meant the aftermath. So sweet potato is actually very easy to grow. You can just like throw it into the soil. So that one sweet potato led to a lot. And then we're like, now what do we do? So my grandma was just giving us sweet potato every day for like a week. So I thought she was talking about that.
Yeah, but it's like fun when you grow it yourself, you value it so much.
There's a book that I'm reading to my son called The Tomato Flood, where basically the children squash the tomatoes and they just, put it in the soil. They're just walking all over it. And the garden is giving and giving and giving and they don't know what to do with it. And but that's the thing about nature, I think, right?
It's like so abundant. We think it's so hard, but like, I watch all these reels and it's this guy, like, so I think like from America or something. And he's like, you just like take basil and you put it in a thing and you do this and you do that and then you have basil forever. And like he does a video like every week for like mint and this and that. And I'm like, that's true. We just don't think about it or prioritize it.
Yeah. So most of your farmers are women?
Yeah. And interestingly, I think usually the person that we speak to might be male. But when you see the people that are working on the farm, majority of them tend to be women. And I think that's something that we forget very often as well, because when we think about farming, we think about like manual labor, very difficult job and stuff like that. And there's this whole narrative of, oh, women are too delicate and gentle. But when you go to rural India and you see, you're like, that's not the reality. We're just like, we're living in some delusional world thinking that women are not doing this hard work. But every farm that you go to, everyone that's harvesting the crop and taking care of the crop is usually women. And farms tend to be like a family run affair, right? So it tends to be that the woman is taking care of it. The husband is kind of going to the market in the morning. The son is venturing into the city, taking the produce and selling it there, or doing whatever is required in terms of payments and stuff like that. So the women play a very, very integral role that I think is not showcased enough.
And most of your employees are also women.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
And most of your consumers are also conscious women.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, we say that the household is consuming us, but it's usually the woman who's doing the puja itself. But for the
Yeah.
whole house, she's doing it.
Yeah. So what's that ecosystem like? Like it's by the women, run by women,
Yeah.
for the women.
I know. Honestly, every time we take group pictures in
Yeah.
our office, we're like, bring some men. Like,
Yeah.
we're like,
We need diversity.
Yeah, we're like, us boys to the front. Like, it's so funny for us when we go to events, they're like, put the ladies in front, you know, they're like the two women speakers. And for us in our office, it's the other way around. We're like, we have boys, like, we do hire men as well. Honestly, it's great. Like, I think it's really nice. And something that we were conscious of, like I saw this meme a while back and it was like diversity in an organization, if you take it as a pyramid, you usually see a lot of diversity in the bottom rungs. And then as you get to the top, it's like the same old, same structure, right? So for us, we wanted to make sure that the diversity is there in the entire circle. So if you look at like most of our senior management, like there are men and there are women there as well. And that was a conscious choice. And when you start with a lot of diversity at the base of your pyramid, how do you move them up? Right? Like Yashoda was saying, like in that farming household, the mom is like the dawn. Like when we go to the house, she's like, eat something. And we're like, yeah, okay. Like, you know, like those ladies are running the show. But it's her son who's in the WhatsApp group with us and who's doing the market connection and stuff because he's a little bit more tech savvy, right? Like has a little bit of education and things like that. So we see a lot of these men come out, which is great, and they need to kind of come out even more. But like these women, like how do we bring them up as well, right? Like the reason that there are so many women on these farms doing the harvesting, doing the picking is they're kind of left behind, right? Like most of them have their husbands living in the city, probably living in horrible conditions, but he has the options of like Zomato delivery, Swiggy delivery, Dunzo, Rapido, all of these things, right? And so he's moved out of his like village or wherever it is, and the lady is left behind and she's doing this agricultural work. So it's positive that we get to work with a lot of women, but we also have to be mindful of what are the jobs that are left over for these women? Like, are these low-paying jobs? And as participants in the industry, how can we make it a high-value job, right? And I think it's true for every industry. Like, even him doing a delivery job, like, those companies are trying to move him up the ladder, right? Give him health benefits, etc. So even in the puja industry, like, it's not that we invented anything new. Like there were so many women already in that industry. So we just kind of adopted that and started from it. A lot of our women used to work in garment factories before and stuff like that. So for them, this is like a really like
it's reverse
nice
migration.
Yeah, like it's a really nice change for them. But then we are like so irritating with them because we're like, no, you're good at your job. Like, no, but like now you have to learn the next skill, right? Because for us, I think the most gratifying moments, we always tell the story, but like when we started, we had two ladies, Vanaja and Kala. And both of them today are like, I say dons a lot, but like literally they're like that. They're like, in our company, they're like the two like iron women. Like Vanaja has a young son and she's always like been super hardworking. And she grew so much that when we opened our Hyderabad office, we sent her to Hyderabad to like set up that entire warehouse. And she has, and she's still in Hyderabad, like running that entire warehouse, you know. And she's like, these ladies aren't working fast enough. Like, we need to do this, tell them to be more efficient. And I'm like, I don't think anyone can do a better job than you at that, right? And Kalavati, she was like on the other side. Vanja was always a little rough and tumble. She was like so soft. She didn't know how to take the bus. So her like husband was like, how will you go to work? All of that stuff. But then we trained her. Like Geeta, who I was speaking about, she took up the initiative. She said, okay, you're going to go to the market and buy flowers every day. This was when we first started. And she was like, I don't know how to read and write and stuff. So Geeta would write it on a paper. She would teach her how to see it and stuff. Then, you know, she kept growing. Today, she runs our entire Bangalore warehouse. She's the floor manager there. For us, it's like, yes, we have a lot of women working on farms and warehouses, but how do we make those jobs more exciting and more fruitful for them?
And a large part of doing that is being able to see examples of people that have done it, right? Like even for Kala and Vanaja, Geeta had taken the initiative from her side to spend that time with them. But for them, they were always like, one day we can be like Geeta ma'am. And they're like, Geeta ma'am does it, why can't we do it, right? And now Kala and Vanaja are that example for so many people. And then we started doing temple orders. So we used to supply flowers to ISKCON and Gangama temple and stuff. And those are specialized garlands. And our ladies didn't know how to do that. So we're like, okay, we need to hire people that have that talent. Suddenly we realized that only men do that. Like the entire, we ended up hiring 2 men who were obviously very good at what they were doing. But I never understood why all the women knew how to make malas. But when it comes to this specialized mala, which is not that much of a different technical skill, they're like, oh, but the men do it. When it comes to this wedding decor kind of stuff, it's the men. And at one point, we're like, this doesn't work. Everybody take training from both of them. And now everyone else in the team does it. But it was just that mind block. Like the first day we got our machine, our entire team is sitting there. There's this one, young male supervisor. They're all looking at him. I'm like, do you know how to run a machine? No. Do you know? No. But it's more likely that he's going to figure it out, right? But I think as institutions or whatever we're setting up, it's so important to break that stereotype in our own heads first and then really break it in the heads of everyone around us.
Yeah, like this machine thing. I remember it was in the beginning, they'd be like, ma'am, no boys came today, so can't run machine. And I was like, hello, you have like so many women. Like it's very easy to run.
Yeah.
And even when we were designing the machines, like I would take my dad with me. Because if I didn't come with a man, or like if my dad was not free, I'd take my driver with me, Because they would like look at him and start talking. And then I could get my foot in and be like, this is how I want the machine. I know it'll work, all of that stuff. So then when it came back, I used to be like, if I can design a machine, why can't a woman run it? So we would train all of our women supervisors and stuff. It was such an uphill battle. It worked. Then I think like 2 years ago or something like that, I went to the warehouse for one of the festivals and we were short-staffed. So I was like, okay, I'll run this machine. You go somewhere else, the lady who was running it. The girl, she's very young. I mean, like, just out of college kind of girl. And her baby Tamanna. And she was like, ma'am, you can't run it. It's very difficult. I'll run it. I was like, baby, you're new to the company. I made this machine. I can run it, But I just thought it was so cool to like see this like young, confident woman. And she was like, I am the machine expert. Like I have worked like 10 hours. I'll continue working. And I was like, it's okay. Like go home. So it's just so nice because within a very short span of time, that can change as well.
It's beautiful. So, even earlier when we were speaking about food and we were asking each other, do you follow any kind of health trends? I realized that while we spoke of it, what both of us gravitated towards is home food, pretty much, and I think that's what we need. I think there's a lot that has been passed on culturally in terms of what you should eat. It's all there. I don't think there are new trends that are needed for us to figure out what qualifies as healthy food, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's just like, I think every study goes back to the more natural it is, closer to the source, the food is better, right? Like, I think one thing that I'm becoming more mindful of now, I honestly wasn't when I was even younger, was just if it's processed, like avoid it as much as possible, like wherever possible. And then when you focus on eating more natural things and eating diverse things that are grown around you, you don't have to worry that much. Like you don't have to think that much about your food. And generally at home, I eat very healthy and I like to eat like different food groups and all of that. So a lot of my friends make fun of me and they're like, oh, you like think too much about your food. And family. And I'm like, it's the opposite. I don't have to think at all because I know like this is all good for me. So I know exactly what I'm having versus being like, oh, I ate this. Now my stomach hurts. Now I feel uncomfortable. I'm bloated. All of those I think are all extra issues that have come up now. When I was a kid, I don't think I ever thought about any of that because naturally you ended up eating more home food or like less processed food and so on.
And So, okay, I have told Vachna this, but I will give the audience the context as well. But I felt like a fraud coming on the show because I have never thought about the food that I've eaten and stuff like that. So in our household, like anything that's put in front of me, I'll eat. Like, I'm just like, as long as I don't have to think about it, like just give it to me. And I think for like most of my life, like till maybe like 2-3 years ago, my grandmom would mix the food and give it to me also. I wouldn't even, and like sometimes when I would serve myself, my mom would be like, you don't like that curry. And I'd be like, oh, okay. And she was right, So like we're on opposite ends there where Yashita's like, this is healthy and like, this is what I want to eat and like stop adding cheese and all this stuff to my food. And I'd be like, yeah, anything you want, like you can do it. Actually, yesterday, before I came on, I was thinking about this, but we have a younger sister. She's 10 years younger. And when I was 16, 18, she must have been 6 or 8. And she still vividly remembers. She calls it like the summer of Vartakalambu. because for one entire summer, my dad and I had tasted Vartakalambu like in some restaurant. And we came back and we were like, you have to make this to my grandmom. And she was like, I don't know what this curry is. She's never had it before. So the whole summer, she was like experimenting with different recipes to get it right. And she can't test out on my dad as much. So I would eat Vartakalambu every day that summer. And my sister was like, you smell like Vartakalambu at this point. Like, come on, get a grip. And she was so young, right? I was just thinking about it. I was like, just so like mindless about what I was eating. But your question about like, has farming changed my relationship to food? I feel actually cooking has changed my relationship with food, because I grew up like with my mom and my grandmom, just like, it comes from so much love, right?
Yeah.
They were like, you don't have to think about it. I'll think about it for you. But once I moved out into my own apartment, like now I have to make my own food. And I've realized like I've picked up so many of like their habits where I'm like, no outside food, I have to finish my fridge, like, you know? And like now that I started cooking, now I'm like, okay, like now I understand what's going into my body and how it's making me feel and proportions and all that stuff. And recently my friend and I went to Ahmedabad and she was like, we have to try the street food. It's so much fun. And we go and like there's all of these like this much cheese on this much toast and like butter chicken, taco, pizza and all that stuff. And I knew that the fun thing and the reason we had gone there is to be like, we'll eat horrible food and it'll feel so good and we'll come back. But I think because I just started cooking, I was like, what is this oil? Like, when have they changed this oil? And I was like, this cheese, like it's just, and she was like, you're so lame. And I was like, I know I'm so lame, but I couldn't eat it. She was like, you're not going to eat anything. And I was like, these pakoras, this thing and stuff. I was like, I can't eat any of this stuff. And I was like, it's true, you know, I never would have thought about it before. But like, as soon as you start like actually paying attention to what you're eating and how it's being made, it's impossible not to be like, how is this chicken like 5 rupees? Like there's no, you know.
And what was your inflection point, Yashoda?
So I used to fall sick a lot as a kid. And once I was in high school and I don't know, I just had like a random bump on my shoulder. My mom and I went doctor to doctor. And then finally we realized it was a tapeworm. And you either get the tapeworm from pork or from leafy vegetables in India because they're not grown in the best water is not used for it and so on. First thing my mom's like, where did you eat pork? And I was like, I did not. I don't think so. And then I wasn't even eating out then. I was at home that summer. And for my mom, I think it was like this big insult or slap in the face because she's like, you're eating home food and you got a tapeworm. And that's when the doctor educated us. He said, no, you know, leafy vegetables, you have to be very careful in India and so on. And that's when I think I just started paying a little more attention to it because you always feel so invincible, right? And that's the thing about being young also. You're like, whatever I eat, I'll be fine. And as a 16-year-old, I was like, why am I in the hospital? Like, this is weird. Why is my mom taking care of me? Like, it's strange. And a couple of years later, I again fell sick. And then it was again related to some food thing with my stomach. And when I was in the US too, I never thought about my food when I was in college. And I remember my roommate and I, we would go for all you can eat buffets like every other day. It would be like $7, $8. And now I'm like, what was in that $7 all you can eat buffet? And you're just eating whatever for the sake of it. And I came back to India and my gut was so messed up. Anything I ate, I would fall sick or be uncomfortable. And it was just so strange. I was like, why am I scared to eat every time? And I had to like rebuild that relationship with food. And now I'm like, when I eat now, I feel light. I feel energized. I like to work out a lot and I like to run a lot. So for me, I look at food genuinely as fuel. I'm like, oh my God, like if I eat this today, I'm going to have such a good run tomorrow morning and so on, right? So that I think just changed how I looked at food. And it was no longer, I think a lot of times it's also about gaining weight and losing weight and stuff. It was none of that. It was like, I'm putting it into my body. Like this is what my body is made out of. It has to be high quality. And yeah, that's how I think it was not one specific moment, but all of these adding up from that first leafy vegetables example. And so for me now, it feels so weird to even eat something that I know is not coming from a good place. Like, yeah, everyone has their indulgences, but I'm like, even if I'm eating dessert or if I'm eating a little sugar, I know it's bad for me, but I'm eating a little. Or if I'm eating something fried, like I would much rather eat fried food at home versus outside. I think you become more mindful and then it no longer feels like a punishment or anything. Yeah. It feels like the right thing to do, in fact.
So do you know where your food comes from?
Not as much as I would like to, is what I would say. I think how to educate yourself is also something that's missing a lot. that also I realized in the US, because I remember I would have a yogurt parfait every day. And I was like, yogurt, granola, and fruits. Wow, I'm so healthy. And, I would send this picture to my mom. One of my friends was like, that yogurt's full of sugar, right? It's actually not that healthy. And I was like, oh, okay. And I would buy chocolate milk. And I'm like, I'm having milk every day. And they're like, there's more chocolate than milk in this. So suddenly I was like, whatever I thought I knew about health and food was marketed in such a way that I just didn't know. Like I was eating the wrong things, thinking I was eating the right things. Now I think I'm more on that journey of understanding how to read a food label better, or how to understand where your food comes from and what is actually important in understanding that. It's easy to be scared of eating everything versus being like, these are the things I kind of have to look out for. So do I know? I know better now, but do I know as much as I would like to? Not yet.
I know there are going to be a lot of people on Yashoda's side of the spectrum, and like they should be. She's like the angel and I'm the devil in this like conversation. But like for so many people, it is going to be like me, right? Like it's so context driven. Like when I went to college, I mean, obviously American food is like horrible, all junk food and stuff. But because I was eating on campus and I was like broke, so I wasn't spending outside food. Like I would eat at the cafeteria, and the cafeteria has a salad bar and chicken breast and all that stuff. Like when I came back, I was like, oh, my allergies got so much better in college because I wasn't eating like the things I was allergic to and all of that stuff. Because whatever, the context was there, it was easy for me and I was doing it. Even someone who didn't care at all. So I feel like people have to know about their food and they have to be conscious about what they're putting in their body. Like your body is your responsibility. But also, how do we build like the context and the community? So like for someone like me, like I wouldn't be comfortable eating like a McChicken burger next to Yeshu eating her chickpeas and like lettuce and broccoli and whatever, right? Because I'm like, oh, okay, like this contrast is too much.
Yeah.
But like when you have a family tradition of like Sunday biryani and like Monday chaat and all that stuff, it comes from so much love and community.
Yeah.
But then it's like actively harming you.
Yeah,
as well.
yeah. Like even when you have guests over and like every time there are people coming to our home and they come with a bar of chocolate, right?
Yeah,
To hand it to your child.
Yeah.
And like there are times where like at the door I've said, like, don't, like just put it back in your bag right now, you know. But like and you know, like you may think sometimes that maybe it's being rude, but I'd rather side with my child, you know, than
and
be
change,
polite and I don't know,
and
like,
change those norms.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Even for me, because I moved into my new apartment, people would keep bringing me cakes. And
she yelled at me once. She didn't let me inside her house because I got her pastries.
And then I told her, I was like, would you eat these pastries? And she's like, no, but you eat them. But I was like, you know, I had 3 cakes in my fridge at some point. So I would give one to my watchman, one to my cleaning lady. But eventually, because I don't have a natural sweet tooth, like it's probably the only saving grace of my health. But like because there's so much chocolate around, like people would be like, oh, welcome, like chocolate, all of that stuff. I started eating a chocolate a day and I could tell I got like this dermatitis thing on my forehead, which I didn't have before.
Yeah.
And I was like such an innocuous like one thing, and it comes from such a loving, good space. But how do we change what that gesture of love looks like? So now like when people are like, what can I bring you? I'm like, don't bring me a cake. If you want to bring me something, this is what you can get me, right?
Yeah.
And I think that culture of giving food always existed.
Yeah.
But earlier it was, hey, these are coconuts from my farm that I'm going to bring to you. And every summer, my uncle sends us mangoes from Andhra. And it's like this 1 week logistical ordeal in my house where my mom's sitting with like her book and paper and someone's like organizing boxes and we're sending mangoes to all our friends in the city. But that's what it is. Like you want to share love through food because food is love. But now I'm like, okay, mango juice instead of these, right? So it is still possible. It's just like changing how you look at it.
Yeah.
And just going back to what you said earlier about all of these like illnesses that are coming up around food and whatever, it's not just physical health, it's also mental health, right? And there's this like unfortunate narrative that like, oh, food is supposed to be enjoyable. So if you're not enjoying eating all this junk food or processed food, like you're not living life. Like the number of times I think my dad has said that to me, he's like, live a little, like what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
But if you actually focus on what you're eating, you notice such a huge difference in your moods, in your overall mental health. And when your physical health is better, your mental health is better, right? Like if you eat light and you eat early, you get a good night's sleep and then you wake up in the morning feeling good, and that kind of like sets your entire day. I think just making people aware of that. And once you experience it, you don't want to go back, right? Like, I like an occasional pack of chips, but I don't want to eat more than that because I'm like, oh, but I want to sleep well. I want to be able to like live my day the way I want to the next day. So I think they all kind of go together. And as a family, when people emphasize being more physically active, you end up eating healthier, or all of those are kind of connected, I think.
Yeah. Like when a friend of mine gave this lollipop to my son when he was 2.
Mhm.
So like children, after 1, you start giving them
Yeah.
all sorts of food, right? And like I had kept him away from chocolates, lollipops, everything.
Mhm.
And when he had his first lollipop, I remember looking at him thinking, this is it, right? There's no
Yeah.
going back from this, because
Yeah.
now he's tasted it. So he is going to ask for it. Like I
Yeah.
can cut down the number of times that he has it, but
Yeah.
I think like when it comes to raising children, it's also about how much can you push it out, right? How
Mhm.
much
Yeah.
can you delay
Mhm.
introducing these?
Yeah.
Or just like teaching them healthy habits so
Yes.
they have that choice to
Yes.
choose.
Yeah.
I think it just because like it's also that idea that like if you keep saying no, right, then everyone's going to retaliate and go to the other
Yeah.
side. Like unlike Ria, and she's like portraying me as someone really healthy, I have a huge sweet tooth, right? Like I have no control around sugar, and I love dessert. So any dessert at home, like it is gone the next day because of me. So in the beginning, my thing used to be like no sugar for 6 months. And obviously it would be very difficult and I would try to do it. But when I changed that and I was like, no, I'll have honey and jaggery, but I won't have processed sugar. Or every time I want to eat dessert, first I'll like eat something and then eat it. And then I realized half of my sugar cravings were not sugar cravings. It was my blood sugar just dropping because I wouldn't eat on time. And suddenly I'm like, oh, I'm really craving a chocolate, but it's because I didn't eat lunch on time that my body is craving sugar. But once I like fix those other habits, automatically I wanted to eat less. Like,
Are they takers for holy colors made
Yeah.
just out of flowers, or agarbattis made out of flowers?
Yeah, we'll show you our holy colors. So these are our holy colors. Yeah, here, you hold them. I'll hand them to you. And these are made completely. Should I open them?
Yeah,
Is it
yeah,
gonna
yeah.
spill?
it's
Like,
okay.
Yeah.
They're easy to wash off.
I've used them.
Oh,
My
okay.
last
Nice.
holy was with
Oh,
them.
nice. So these are made completely with like dried flowers. So like the ingredients is like flowers and sunlight. Like that's all it is. And like people love it,
Yeah.
right? Because you get your other holy colors. They're like, should I put them on? No. You go to office the next day, your ears are pink like for
Yeah,
1
yeah.
week and stuff like that. And you know it's horrible
It
for you.
is,
Like
yeah,
if
yeah.
it's like not coming off for so long. So I think people love it, but it's about how you like market it and how you communicate it, right? Like for us, like at the back of this tin too, like I don't know how many people actually look at the back, but I was most excited about this because I was like, Holi is welcoming in spring, right? And it's all about like everything blooming around you. Bangalore should be pink and yellow and all of these
Yeah.
wonderful colors. And Holi is about celebrating the colors that you're seeing in nature, like by yourself. So yes, we have these 4 colors, but at the back we have a little map of like how you can make your own colors. Like,
Beautiful.
you know, tell kids like go out, look around, like is there a purple jacaranda tree, like hibiscus tree, like collect them, like boil the flowers or dry them or grind them, do whatever you want to do, and like play with nature, right? And like enjoy its colors, because honestly that's how these colors came around. Like one day in office I was just like, there is a purple jacaranda tree outside our office, so I was like, I wonder if I can make holy colors out of this. And I took it to the kitchen and I was like, you know, playing around with it. And obviously the kitchen is my grandmom's domain. So, sorry. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. And so she was like, you know, she saw what I was doing and she just started her own operation to the side where she like sent out my maid, got some like marigold leaves and was doing her own green. And she was like, yeah, I'm using the mixer grinder right now. You can't use it. And I was like, this is my project. But then she came up with so many cool colors, right? And we were like, that's what makes it so fun. So I think people want this.
Yeah.
Like even our agarbattis are made out of like dried flowers and stuff. And people are like, just loving it, you know, like we keep getting, yesterday we got a request from America and we're like, now how do we send it all the way there? But I think if we tell the story right, people are like really open to it, right?
Yeah.
And Holi is like fun, right? And kids love it. And when you're a kid, you don't care about like messing up your clothes and all of that. But it's so sad because so many parents are scared to let their kids play because they're like, oh, these synthetic colors and so on. So when we started it, and Ria used to post a lot of content around how she was making the Holi colors, so many young moms would reach out to us and be like, oh, you know, like I want to celebrate my kids' first Holi, or like I would never let my kids play Holi before, but like if these colors are actually made out of dried flowers, then I'm okay with it. Like, can we test it out and stuff? Which was just really nice because again, it's that fear versus like enjoying life, like being scared of the food you eat or being scared of what's put on you. When you have access to nice, like fresh natural stuff, then you're no longer scared to like live life, and you're able to like allow your kids to enjoy it as well.
So true.
Yeah.
Like, sorry, when we were doing the testing, I used my mom as a model to like do skin tests and stuff. And then when she was washing it, she was like, "Oh, my skin is so soft, like because it's a rose scrub, like
Yeah.
literally, right?" So then she started using it as a face pack, which I actually didn't know. But recently, she sent a hamper to one of her friends, and she was like, "You keep one aside for you, rest is for your grandson because you can use it as a face pack." So I'm like hearing these ladies doing all of this in the background, and I was like, there's so many uses for this. Like even at our holy party, like. People are throwing the powder at each other, and obviously it gets in your mouth and everything, and they're like, neem, like, it's such a strong neem taste. And I was like, it's all neem, it's all natural.
Yeah.
One of the parents who had come to the Akshay Kalpa farm, she was telling her child that play all you want with mud. You don't get mud in the city anymore. Because in the cities we tell them don't touch this, don't touch that. And then when they come to the farm, we want them to suddenly, and we see a lot of kids who come to the farm don't want to touch the mud because they've been told over and over again not to do it. But
so different for us because my 2 childhood projects was making gum out of those tree gum things and making clay. Remember, we used to like filter the soil in our grandparents' garden, and we were like, we'll make clay out of this. We never actually achieved it. So,
So we have a few questions on food. Quick questions, okay? So if you could give one piece of advice to someone starting their clean eating journey, what would it be?
Eat as natural as possible. Avoid processed food.
I'm not qualified.
What's your go-to meal when you want something quick, healthy, and clean?
Honestly, I love curd rice. That's my go-to.
Okay, now that I live by myself, I do cook for myself. I like to do like strawberries. I think that's like a fun snack.
Okay. What's the most surprising thing you've learned about food labels?
Less sugar or no sugar means nothing. Like, I honestly still don't know what that means. Because, it's just like sugar is used as a buzzword. I don't know.
I don't read the books. I feel like such a...
If you had to describe good food in 3 words, what would they be?
I would say tasty, nutritious, and makes you feel good about yourself after you eat.
Can I skip these questions? I agree with her as well.
What's a food tradition from your childhood that you still follow?
Yeah, for me, my grandmom used to make pulihara, and every festival, like that was the food that would always be there. And then there's a specific sweet. It's called like Poonam in Telugu, and it's like dal and jaggery on the inside and bread that's deep fried on the outside. But honestly, like for me, her making it every time, like, she would take the jaggery, put the bread, and then kind of soak it, and we would just be waiting for it to be done so we could eat. But what was like special about the tradition is that it could be made any day, but we would always look forward to the next festival to eat it because it felt like you could only eat it then. So even if you're like not eating something that's healthy, it's okay because it's in a small quantity and you appreciate it more versus being like, I can just Swiggy it whenever I want it.
2 things. One is our grandmom ran the kitchen, so it's Amama related. During Ugadi last year, I made Ugadi Pachadi, which was kind of her thing that she would make every year. And it was so fun, and like we all got to sit around as a family and eat it. Even though it's like the simplest thing you can make. The second thing is our grandmom was always known for like, she made amazing food, and then she would keep adding ingredients to make it healthier and healthier. And then eventually you'd be like, what is this that I'm eating? Like, it would be unrecognizable. Now that I cook for myself, I've like started to see that in myself also. I'm like, oh, if I add one more ingredient that's healthy, like maybe it'll be better. And then I ruin it, but then I also make it healthier, like somewhere in the middle.
What's the one non-negotiable ingredient in your grocery cart?
For me, just generally a lot of fruits and vegetables.
Okay.
Yeah, I eat a lot of like carrots. I like carrots.
What's one ingredient that you ensure never enters your kitchen?
Okay, this is like not a healthy answer. I say chilies because I hate spicy food. I can't stand it. So chilies.
Yeah, for me, like I'm allergic actually to like tomatoes and spinach and stuff. So I try to keep them out of the kitchen.
Okay. What's your favorite kitchen experiment gone wrong?
I don't cook that much, so it's a little harder to answer. But I think experiment gone wrong is whenever I've tried to bake. Because when I actually see how much sugar I'm putting in, it makes it not that fun to eat the dessert after. But yeah.
I've been playing around with cooking, and I did caramelized carrots like in my oven. And all the like maple syrup just dripped out of the oven and like down into my thing. And I was doing something else. I was like in a puddle of maple, and then just had ants for like weeks after that. And I was like, carrots are sweet enough by themselves. Like,
Okay. What food trend you think is totally overrated?
So, okay, I'm going to answer this in a different way. Protein in the Indian diet is not overrated. I think it's extremely important. But the way protein, like everything now says high in protein. So I think that like using protein as a marketing thing is overrated. Yeah, but
I agree.
If a movie was made about your food choices, what would it be called?
it would just be really boring. No one would watch it.
Yeah, that says a lot about the struggle of marketing what we do at Akshay Kalpa. Okay, conscious eater or driven by cravings?
I don't crave food. I think that's a problem. I don't crave food. I don't think about food either. I eat whatever's in front of me.
So that's not the problem. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good thing if like what's put in front of me is good. Yeah.
Okay.
Conscious eater.
Guided by taste or mindful choices?
Mindful choices.
Taste. Yeah.
Eat in or dine out?
Okay, contrary to everything I've said so far, I've always liked eating out. So dine out usually, but changing to eat in.
I actually love to eat in. So I feel like we're getting points. I feel like now I'm like coming out of the red.
Order in or cook at home?
Cook at home.
Moving to cook at home.
Locally sourced ingredients or exotic flavors?
Locally sourced ingredients.
Locally.
Organic or conventional?
Should be more organic, currently conventional.
I'm like trying to figure it out like from a wallet perspective. But organic like tastes better. And I don't know if it's placebo or what it is. So yeah.
Okay. Know my farmer or know my brand?
Know my brand through my farmer, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I think they go hand in hand, right?
Yeah, it depends on the produce,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
No, it depends. Like, for example, you may know your farmer who's coming to sell, let's say, like the
that way.
mangoes that you spoke
Yeah.
about. You
Yeah.
know? So
Okay.
then there is no brand. So
Oh, that way.
Yeah.
Well, practically, I guess, know my brand. Like two brands that I really, really stick to, Akshay Kalpa, obviously, and the Whole Truth. And with Whole Truth foods, I said, right, I avoid
Yeah.
processed food a lot. But the only thing that's processed is my protein powder, and only from the Whole Truth, because I don't know, like the way Shashank stands out and talks about the brand, I'm like, there's some honesty to what he's saying. So I know I can just trust him blindly and have whatever he's giving us.
snacking throughout the day or structured meals?
Structured meals.
Snacking throughout the day.
This is
Which one is better?
changing.
Who got more points? Which one is the healthier choice?
Definitely structured meals.
Oh, nice. Okay.
but if it's like-
good one.
Small, healthy snacking, I think, is also fine.
Okay.
+5 to me.
Reusable containers or biodegradable packaging?
Reusable. containers.
Reusable.
Fresh produce or frozen convenience?
Fresh produce.
Fresh. I feel like especially now with quick commerce.
Yeah. Food as nourishment or food as indulgence?
Food as nourishment.
Indulgence.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's in, I don't know. Both, I guess. Yeah.
Energy bars or homemade snacks?
Homemade snacks.
Homemade.
Okay, that's the end of it. Thank you so much.
Thank
This
you.
was such a fun episode. I think like sometimes on these podcasts we get a little too serious. I think this brought in a lot of fun but very, very insightful takeaways for all
Yeah.
of all
Thank
of
you
the
so
people
much.
watching. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much
Thank
for
you.
having us.
Yeah.
I felt like a fraud coming on, as you know. But I think one thing we didn't touch upon that I did want to mention is like when we're talking about context and community for good food, I feel like content like this is so important. Like I feel like today, like health is becoming so much cooler because so many people are talking about it, and you guys are such a big part of that movement. So
Yeah.
like even though I'm not super healthy, I feel happy to have been on this show and like contribute to it somewhat. So
Yeah.
thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.